So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you on this topic. I've known NKCP actually longer than 4 years that I've been using it. Mark is always pushing that to me for cardio problems, cardiovascular problems, patients with cardiovascular problems, but I don't get too much patients cardiovascular, so I get mostly cancer patients. So I wasn't using it. I was only using Lentin Plus, a lot of it in all my patients. They have very good responses, but I still was not satisfied. So when I got to know that cancer is able to evade the immune system, even if you strengthen the immune system, it's able to evade it through this camouflage. And I got to know that NKCP is able to remove that. I started using it on my patients, and since then, many of my patients' recovery rates went up from 60% to 90% able to recover, even stage 4 disease already. So I'd like to begin with a little bit of history of how these things were first identified. So the discovery of this cancer camouflage. So it was in 1865. So it was in 1865 when Armand Trousseau observed several cases of excessive covers around the cancer that blocks blood flow in cancer patients. But he was not able to guess the underlying reason. In 1882, Bizocero first demonstrated that blood platelets adhere to damaged blood vessels and guessed that platelets played a central role in blood flow balance and experimental clot formation. So platelets was found to trigger this cover around cancer cells. Subsequently, Race reported an association between excessive platelets, defined as a platelet count of more than 400 times 10 to the 9 per liter of blood, and cancer death. There's a correlation. So, and then later, almost a century later, which is around our time now, 1900s, and then about when we're still maybe in our 20s, around that time. These preliminary observations were revisited and confirmed, initiating a renewed interest in a potential role of these platelets in cancer spreading in the body and invasion of other tissues and organs of the body, and new blood vessel formation. So, the second most common killer of cancer patients is too much of this camouflage that covers the cancer, and they block the blood flow and lead to bleeding. So that's how the patients eventually die. When the blood flow is blocked, and so the ending is something like a cardiovascular disease, like a heart attack or stroke. But it's really the cancer that did that. So how does cancer cover itself with this camouflage in order to hide from our surveillance soldiers and evade our body's killer soldiers. So this is how they do it. They do it in a schema. Cancer cells circulating in the blood, we call them CTCs. Okay? So this is the tumor, the primary site where the tumor is growing. They spread to the blood. They spread to the different parts of the body, passing through the blood, and then they in the blood we call them CTCs, or circulating tumor cells or cancer cells circulating in the blood. These cancer cells circulating in the blood activate and aggregate blood platelets. Now, we can call these platelets like plants. You know, imagine a soldier who's going to cross a field, going to the other side, and what will he use to cover himself so that he will not be seen and be hit? He will use the plants around. Okay? So, let's imagine like these platelets are like the plants around in the field. And so these plants are made to surround the cancer cells to evade being killed by the natural killer cells or NK cells. Okay? So we have natural killer cells in the blood. That's our soldier that will supposed to recognize the cancer and kill the cancer. Okay? So our cancer-killing soldiers of the immune system are the natural killer cells. Okay? Now these plants or platelets release something like an aroma. You know, they release something like an aroma that makes the natural killer cells, soldiers, these are the soldiers, sleep. They are inhibited. So they don't attack because of this aroma released by these plants. Right? I'm just making this in layman so you understand it. You know, these are actually molecules released by the platelets that inhibits the natural killer cells. So cancer cells in the blood look also like platelets. So they mimic the platelets. So they will look like the same thing that's out there in the field so that the killer soldiers will not attack them. Right? So this plant cover also is as a camouflage will ensure the cancer's survival in the bloodstream. Okay? So there they are. They're covered by the platelets. These are the platelets inactive. They are activated by the cancer cells, and the cancer cells are surrounded by the platelets. And their survival of the cancer cells will allow them to come out of the blood vessels and reproduce in another part of the body. Okay? The plant cover produce also twigs. Okay? So you see those twigs, okay? Covering. Okay? So they are technically what we call fibrin plaques, okay? What we will call twigs. So these fibrin plaques provide important scaffolding. Okay? You know what a scaffold is? Okay? For the cancer cell, so that it can attach to the sides of the blood vessels. So you see here now, the scaffolding will allow them to attach to the side of the blood vessel, to form and supply, attach to the sides of the blood vessel, which we call them endothelium. Okay? The plants also allow new blood vessels to form and supply the cancer cells with nutrients for their growth and survival. Okay? So there, when they come out, they also have blood supply. It's also the platelets that gave them the ability to survive out there with blood vessels. Okay? So cancer is really a survival expert. Survival expert. It knows its way around. And so in the blood where we have our soldiers, they can protect themselves this way. Okay? So if that's what they do, I better attack them there, right? So, and one other mechanism, which Dr. Owako also talked about, there's evidence, many studies, this study is showing it, there's elevated levels of I1 in cancer patients, and this may contribute to blood clots circulating in the blood. Right? So it's really blood clots. These tweaks are called tweaks, aggregated tweaks circulating in the blood. Okay? But these tweaks actually are the camouflage of the cancer. Okay? So, how do we combat this against this camouflage? Anti-camouflage formation for cancer patients. Okay? In the average cancer patient population, ambulatory, that means they're going around, they're not in the hospital, okay? The overall risk of these aggregated tweaks, okay, in the veins, forming in the veins, is about 4% to 6%. These aggregated tweaks can kill the patient either by blocking the flow of blood or their inability to form more tweaks when needed, that bleeding happens. It's like they're all consumed already, so that when there is a need to stop the flow of blood, there's nothing to use. So they bleed. And they can bleed to death. So, however, this risk is clearly higher with certain cancers, like gastrointestinal cancer, especially gastric and pancreatic disease, along with lung cancer and a few others. Okay? The risk is increased for the first 3 months after the diagnosis of cancer and accumulates over time. Bleeding complications are also increased in cancer patients, both with treatment and with the use of this thromboprophylaxis. Okay? So, are there guidelines for patients? Guidelines for the management of this excessive camouflage cover that is being formed. There are guidelines from different groups, NCCN, ASCO, ACCP. These are medical groups that doctors who have formulated these guidelines. All of these guidelines actually presently state that for cancer patients with new blood clots, you treat with low molecular weight heparin for the first 3 to 6 months. After that, the guidelines vary somewhat in terms of the next step recommendations after that. Okay? But what's the problem? Heparin inactivates thrombin, and Dr. Owako also talked about thrombin, so heparin inactivates thrombin, which stops the formation of bleeding tweaks. So this can help, thus stopping blood thrombus formation. Okay? But the side effect is bleeding. Okay? There's already bleeding problem, there's too much cancer, there's going to be a bleeding problem, then you're going to aggravate the bleeding with heparin. So now, after that is done, what is the recommendation for long-term anti-camouflage management? Okay? An important study that might provide some data was done, and in this study, some patients can be switched from low molecular weight heparin to warfarin after 6 months. The authors concluded that in patients with cancer-associated thrombosis who complete 6 months of anticoagulation with heparin, switching to warfarin does not increase the risk of recurrent venous thromboembolism, major bleeding, or total bleeding as compared to continuous low molecular weight heparin. Okay? However, warfarin blocks the formation of vitamin K dependent clotting factors, and the side effect again is bleeding. So really problem. Okay? So, how about aspirin? Okay. Aspirin and cancer. There is a convincing evidence now that regular low-dose aspirin not only reduces vascular disease incidence and mortality, but also reduces the incidence and mortality of colorectal and other cancers. Okay. Furthermore, there is growing evidence which suggests that aspirin used as an adjunct or additional treatment following a diagnosis of cancer may reduce the spread, a metastatic spread, and may increase the survival of patients with cancer. It appears likely that low-dose aspirin has a beneficial role as an adjunct treatment of cancer. Reductions in mortality are shown in colon cancer, probably in prostate cancer, and possibly in breast, and individual studies of several other cancers also suggest benefit. Right? But what is the problem? Aspirin can cause stomach and intestinal bleeding, which is fatal, although the risk is low. But you don't want to be that one individual out of 100. You know? So my question is there anything that will break up the camouflage, okay, the camouflage cover of the cancer, but will not prevent cover formation when it is needed, such that there will be no bleeding side effect? Is there anything? So I looked at natto. You know natto? Natto is a Japanese traditional fermented food made from soybean with growing Bacillus subtilis variety natto. That's why it was called natto. So NKCP was taken from there. Right? NKCP is a fruit-based extract of natto, okay? A Japanese traditional fermented food made from soybean. Purified NKCP is a purified filtrate of Bacillus subtilis variety natto culture. So purification of that removes most of the distinctive odor of natto and its vitamin K2. So have you eaten natto? Anyone eaten natto? Oh, a lot of you, right? You must know about this. The Japanese are living very long because of this natto. Centenarians, a lot of centenarians because of natto. And traditionally, when this was initially studied, with this food, the risk of heart attacks and strokes are down, right? Very, very low. So that's how they live long. So NKCP was taken from there, okay? And there's no more. The taste is not there anymore. Okay? So, but the activity is there. It yields an easy-to-eat food that has a wide variety of uses as a functional food. NKCP. So this contains these proteolytic enzymes secreted by the Bacillus subtilis variety natto. Okay? And this will balance the cover formation in the blood. Okay? So take note, the key word there is balance. When it's needed, it will happen. When it's not needed, it should not happen. Okay? And when too much is produced, that's what I want. When too much is produced, too much of those twigs, they should be cut out and the cancer treated so that it can be recognized. Okay? So in vitro and clinical studies have demonstrated that the consistent intake of NKCP over a prolonged period helps to maintain normal circulation. Okay? The safety of NKCP has been demonstrated in safety studies. So this is very important for me, safety. Okay? So I look at the safety studies and I'll show you the safety studies. Okay? Single dose. Okay? How much will you need in an animal study? They do this on animals, poor animals. Okay? They want to determine at what dose will 50% of the animals die. Okay? LD50, that's what we call it. Okay? So lethal dose 50%. Okay? And what is the dose that will kill 50%? It's 5,000 milligrams, that's 5 kilograms, okay, per kilogram of body weight. That's very, very high. So that means it's really safe. Probably they die of choking. So that's very high. Repeated dose. How about repeated dose? If you repeat it every day, give this. Okay? What is the dose where there is no adverse events? Okay? That's no L. Okay? No L. And for males, it's 1,325 milligrams per kilogram body weight, okay? Per day. Okay? And for females, it's 1,541 milligrams per kilogram body weight per day. Again, that's very high. So even repeated dose is too high. You might also choke from 2 months. Okay? So how about is it mutagenic? Because if it's something is toxic, mutagenic, it can cause cancer also. Okay? So and the test shows it is negative. Okay? Even whether it's metabolized by our liver or not, okay, it's not mutagenic. How about its irritation or antigenicity? Okay? It's also negative, whether active systemic anaphylactic reaction or passive cutaneous anaphylactic reaction. Anaphylaxis is what? Allergies. Okay? So whether active or passive type of allergy, it's negative. Okay? So it's non-allergenic. Okay? Now, how about effect on bleeding time? Because if it will affect the clotting, does it affect the bleeding time? Okay? Many of the anticoagulants affect the bleeding time. That's precisely their purpose. But does this affect bleeding time? Okay? And the study showed it did not prolong the bleeding time. Okay? How about interaction with warfarin? Because there's sometimes question that already taking warfarin. Can I take that? The study showed no added delay in coagulation was observed. There was a delay in the coagulation with warfarin. Okay? That's why it's an anticoagulant. But there was no added delay when NKCP was added. Compared to the warfarin treatment group. Another study about actual human studies, long-term administration. 23 healthy adults were given NKCP at 250 milligrams per day for 12 weeks, and no clinically significant adverse events were observed. There were no statistically significant changes in the blood, hematology, or even the biochemistry tests of the blood. Another study for 5 healthy adults, they were given NKCP at a higher dose, 750 milligrams per day for 6 consecutive weeks, that's 1.5 months, to study and observe the changes in the laboratory tests. Again, hematologic tests and biochemistry tests, even blood coagulation and fibrinolysis parameters, and adverse events. As a result, the ELT shortened, TPA decreased, thromboplastinogen activity test increased, but all values were within normal range. In addition, no adverse events were observed, suggesting NKCP safety. How about high doses for humans? 8 healthy adults were given NKCP at 1,250 milligrams per day for 7 consecutive days. Observation of clinical signs and laboratory tests were utilized to evaluate NKCP safety. There were no clinically significant adverse events again observed. There were no abnormal changes in the hematologic or biochemistry tests. Okay. So, really this NKCP balances the coagulation, fibrinolysis in the body. Okay. So, and its mechanism of action is it inhibits the clot formation in vitro and in vivo when needed, and decreases the viscosity of the blood in vitro and in vivo. And this is what I like, the lysing the clot in vitro and in vivo, because it is the clot that is the camouflage of the cancer. So I'll show you the studies that support those mechanisms. In this study, 30 microliters of the test substance NKCP was added to 3 ml of venous blood collected from healthy volunteers who had given informed consent, followed by inversion. The mixture was warmed at 37 degrees centigrade. Those are the details of the procedure for 250 seconds and then centrifuge. And the supernatant tank was measured for fibrin monomers. Okay? Now, this fibrin monomers is indicative of the clot camouflage thrombus formation. Okay? So, the higher the fibrin monomers, okay, the greater the clot. Using this latex immunity analysis. The concentration of fibrin monomers was 160 after addition of the control physiological saline and 6 after addition of heparin sodium. After addition of NKCP at concentrations from 0.005 to 0.5 milligrams per ml, the concentration of fibrin monomers decreased dose dependently but leveled off at 0.05 milligrams. So there is reduction in the thrombus formation, but eventually it leveled off. Okay. So here in this study, the anticoagulant effect of NKCP was studied in a rat model of thrombus formation. In this model, platelet aggregation was caused by injuring or breaking the endothelial linings of the blood vessels of the abdominal descending aorta of the animal to induce thrombus formation. NKCP was administered into the duodenum 2 hours after producing the thrombus formation model using an in situ loop method. Blood was collected from the abdominal aorta 6 hours after administration to determine activated partial thromboplastin time, or APTT, and prothrombin time as indicators of endogenous and exogenous coagulation or clotting. APTT was 33 seconds for the control group, administered physiologic saline, 52 seconds for the NKCP 100 milligram per kilogram group, and 63.3 seconds for the NKCP 250 milligram per kilogram group. Okay? So a significant coagulation delay was observed in NKCP treatment group as compared to control. These results suggest that NKCP inhibits thrombus formation. Okay, so here in this study, they looked at viscosity. 80 healthy male adults who had given informed consent were given a single dose of placebo or NKCP at 1,250 milligrams. And blood was collected at various points over 240 minutes to measure the changes in blood viscosity. In the NKCP group, there was a significant decrease in blood viscosity at 105 to 180 minutes as compared to baseline. There was a significant decrease in blood viscosity in the NKCP group as compared to placebo at 180 minutes. Okay? So there you can see the difference. Okay? Now this is the key study that interested me. Okay? In fact, when Mark showed this to me, that's the one that clinched it. Okay. Here. So a small amount of NKCP was added to test tubes in this study here, containing an artificial clot or camouflage thrombus in the saline, saline with the same concentration of salt as that of our body. So the clot or the camouflage thrombus began to lyse within several minutes and was almost completely lysed at 3 hours. Okay? So you can see it there. Okay? So at 1 hour, the thrombus was lysed. Okay? This is with NKCP. At 3 hours, completely lysed the thrombus. So the thrombolytic or camouflage lysing effect of NKCP on rat model was also observed in a 14-week study. This NKCP was evaluated in 2 groups in a mix of 0.2 and 1% in the feed as compared to the control group. Okay? Helium neon laser was induced the thrombosis or the camouflage formation in the mesenteric microvessels. So after inducing the thrombus, the size of the artificially produced thrombus was measured from the time of formation to evaluate the thrombolytic effect of NKCP. So in the beginning, they're all thrombus. Okay? Thrombolytic or camouflage lysing activity clearly increased with dose dependently in the NKCP treatment groups compared with the control group. There was an 82% decrease in thrombus clot volume in the control group as compared to 67% decrease in 0.2 NKCP group and a 51% decrease statistically significant in the 1% NKCP group. The extent of thrombolysis in the 1% group was equivalent to that seen in animals treated with a bolus of intravenous infusion, 0.2 milligram per kilogram of tissue plus minogen applicator. Based on the body weight and feed intake of rats used in this study, the dose of NKCP was calculated to be about 160 milligrams per kilogram per day for the 0.2% NKCP feed and 800 milligrams per kilogram per day for the 1% NKCP feed. So it depends on you what you want to use personally. Okay? 160 or the 800 milligrams per kilogram per day. So the thrombolytic effect of NKCP is attributable to this proteolytic enzyme named bacillopeptidase F. So, Mark, I think focused on that earlier, that the important ingredient, important component there in NKCP is this bacillopeptidase F, because that is the one that is responsible for lysing the clot, or breaking up our, what I call the twigs, okay, that covers the cancer cells. Okay? So this bacillopeptidase F is produced by the Bacillus subtilis variety natto. Okay? Bacillopeptidase F is shown to be only one of 5 proteases produced and secreted by Bacillus subtilis variety natto. So here in this study, a total of 23 adults, okay, including patients with metabolic disease related to thrombosis, were given 250 milligrams NKCP for 2 consecutive months. Coagulation, fibrinolysis parameters, and symptoms were evaluated 1 to 2 months after starting treatment. globulin lysis time, that's ELT, significantly decreased from baseline value at 1 and 2 months, and TPA significantly increased at 2 months, showing the accelerated fibrinolysis system. However, the measured ELT and TPA values were within normal ranges. Fibrinogen degradation products significantly decreased 1 month after starting ingestion, but returned to baseline value at 2 months. The symptoms of shoulder stiffness significantly improved from baseline at 1 and 2 months. So, when I started to use this on my patients, I'd like to show you what happened. Show you a case of pancreatic cancer where the evaluation I used is a new test. It's not yet standard of care for the hospitals. It's still developmental, this procedure, but they are able to detect, at least in the Philippines, we're able to do there are 2 labs that are able to detect the presence of cancer cells circulating in the blood. Different cancer cells circulating in the blood. Okay? So, I'll show you the results with these patients. So this is a pancreatic cancer patient diagnosed with pancreatic adenocarcinoma. Okay? And so this is the second page of that lab result. Okay? And I got the patient sometime October 2014, already diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and the mass is so big that the surgeon didn't want to operate. Okay? The only recommendation was to do chemotherapy. Radiation was also contraindicated for this patient. So only chemotherapy was advised. And so when we look at the circulating cancer cells, one of the cancer cell types that is that we can detect at here at the lung center is the EpCAM type. There are different types of cancer cells, and they detect EpCAM. So in the beginning, the value is, let me make that bigger for you. There, you can see the value, 601 cells per ml. See, you can actually count the number of cells in the blood, cancer cells. 601 cells, cancer cells per ml of blood. Multiply that by 7,000, that's how many cancer cells in the entire blood. And that's November 2014. By February 2015, it's down to 2. Okay? There, make it bigger for you. Then, by June of 2015, it's already 1. It's going down. I'm using a combination because if I only use NKCP, the cover is removed, the camouflage is removed, but who will kill? I need to increase the activity of the killers because the cancer is inhibiting with that aroma I was telling you. So I need to give these killers, cancer killers, the ability not just to recognize the cancer, but to kill it, right? With what? Bullets. And that's what Lentin Plus does. Okay? It increases the granules or the bullets carried by the natural killer cells. So it's the treatment here I gave is a combination of Lentin Plus and NKCP. And I initially did a dosing trial of 222 first, and I tested the response, circulating tumor cells. It did not go down. So I raised it up to 444, and that's when the blood circulating cancer cells were going down already. So the effective dose is 4, or the minimum, I think it's just the minimum effective dose is 4 capsules 3 times a day. Okay? So the next result is still 1. Okay? In that patient, pancreatic cancer patient, you know, the survival of pancreatic cancer is only 3 to 6 months. Okay? But that patient survived 3 years. And most of my cases who follow my recommendation, okay, the diet and these nutraceuticals that I prescribe, those who follow, okay, their survival rates is response and recovery rates goes up to almost 90 or more than 90%. So, and for pancreatic cancer patients, their survival is at least 2 years. It's 2 years or more. It's not 6 months. 2 years or more. So I have other parameters that I look. Makati Med is not only lung center in the Philippines, but also Makati Med. They're also able to do this test. And just to make it very simple for you, okay, when the levels become below detection, that means the cancer cells could not be detected anymore, right? So this is November 2014. By March 12, 2015, these cancer cell types were below detection limit. Okay? And the others, if you look at the values, comparing this with that, the value went up. Okay? When the value goes up, that means the levels of cancer cells are going down. Okay? So most of the values went up, that means the cancer cells are going down. These are the different cancer cell types that can be identified in the blood. Okay? I have other cases like breast cancer, and the same thing, same result that I get. Okay? So this is 2015 and 2016. You will see the values are also going up. Okay? So for these different types of cancer cells. Okay? Here's the result, the actual result at Makati Med. Then a third case, so I can show you different cases. Colon cancer this time. And again, if you look at the values, let's make that big so you can see it. Okay. So GAPDH, ACTB, so the values, this is a reference actually. So we already have a reference range. It is sort of like a normal values. Okay. So we can say whether it's the cancer cells are present or not. Okay. And if they are within the range, that means the cancer cells are not present. Okay. So this is not present. This is also not present. This is also not present. See, by June 2016, they're all not present. Okay? And this is at lung center. Their analysis is different. It's fold value. Okay? And you will see from this baseline, that's July 2016. And then by October 2016, you will see the remarks there, they're all negative. Okay? So from present, the cancer cells are absent. Okay? I have in a handful of patients already negative from positive cancer cells circulating in their blood. Their blood do not have cancer cells anymore. Okay? But I only release them and say you're cancer free if 1 entire year they're free. I mean, there's no more cancer cells in the blood. So we continue with the treatment for an entire year, additional entire year, to make sure that all the cancer cells in the body get cleared. I want to hit the bone marrow where the cancer cells are hiding, so that the bone marrow will be cleared also. We cannot monitor the bone marrow, it's only the blood, but if the blood is cleared of cancer cells for an entire year, most likely the bone marrow is cleared. Okay? So my conclusion in this observations that I made for my patients is that NKCP is a safe way to remove the fibrin camouflage, protecting the cancer cells from the NK cell attack, okay? Natural killer cell attack, and help reduce the burden of cancer cells circulating in the blood, where metastasis or spreading of the cancer begins. So perhaps if we do an actual, I'm encouraged now, and I'd like to encourage the company to support me on this, doing a formal study on this dosing, increasing the dose, and looking at not just reduction and clearing in the blood of cancer cells, but also looking at their survival. How long can we make them live? I'm sure it's not forever. And also, can we reduce the spreading of this cancer in the body, the metastasis? Because aspirin already has that ability to reduce metastasis and prolong survival. But that survival may be limited by bleeding. So what about NKCP? So thank you very much for your attention.